477.
With the power of Tandem HR, you are in the fast lane on Main Street with Get Down to Business with Shalom Klein, the show for business and jobs. Now, the champion of networking, the advocate of jobs, the guru of business, your host, Shalom Klein.
We are all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship and business. We talk a lot about business here. You are on with Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts from Get Down to Business on my website at shalomklein.com. And while you are there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. It's going to be a jam-packed week of content and information you will not want to miss. It's a live show. You can call us at 312-642-5600, 312-642-5600. Our good friends at Tandem HR are the fantastic sponsors and supporters of Get Down to Business. Make sure you give them a call. Find out more about the fantastic work that they do, tandemhr.com, or give them a call, 630-928-0510. So we've all had that moment. That breakthrough moment. We're going to talk to somebody that can tell us a little bit about their breakthrough moment and how they are helping the small business community. I'm thrilled to be joined by Evie Carpel of Breakthrough. That's literally what they do. Breakthrough Partners. Thank you so much for joining us on Get Down to Business. Evie Carpel of Breakthrough Results. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So we've all had those breakthrough moments. What was yours that inspired you to help other businesses by consulting and helping them grow and work through those challenging moments?
Well, Shalom, I started my first company when I was 26 years old, and I really didn't have anyone to support me. And so my husband and I have owned many, many companies, and we just decided in 2001 to really pool all of our experiences together and our connections and really help entrepreneurs through the entrepreneurial life cycle. And so that really brings them to a place where if they're stuck, they're overwhelmed, they got the tiger by the tail, they're not quite sure what to do. So we really help them break through that, mostly from our experience, but also from training people and helping people.
That's fantastic. And we're going to talk about some of the examples in just a few minutes, but let's talk about industries. Let's talk about some of the businesses that you and your team at Breakthrough Results are able to, by utilizing your experience, help, as you said, break through some of those barriers. Are there any industries that you've specifically focused on, or are there any industries that you can't work with?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Actually, we find entrepreneurs, no matter what industry they're in, they all face very similar issues. One of our larger companies was a computer consulting firm, so my husband does more in that area and technology, that kind of thing. I love wellness and integrative healthcare. I help people in that particular arena a lot. But I also have people in the pet industry, and I have a lawyer that I work with. So it really depends on where the person is, and that's where we meet them, finding out what they're looking for, how we can bring them to the next level. As I mentioned a little bit before, that if they're stuck, how we can bring them to that. So we found that any kind of entrepreneur goes through very similar stages. In the beginning, they're excited, they're passionate, they're ready to go. They they become a little bit more stable, perhaps, but then there's always dips and challenges, cash flow issues, or they're so busy they're not quite sure how to handle life and their businesses as well.
Sure.
And so it really helps in all different kinds of industries.
Well, you have a fantastic niche, and I'm curious, how big is too big and how small is too small to work with you, Evie, and your husband, Tom?
Well, we both work with individuals. So we usually work with people who are, we have two things. We have a couple of groups, roundtable groups that we do, and those are divided between under $5 million and over $5 million. But I also work with a lot of startup companies. So people who are just starting out, maybe they were in corporate America, they really wanted to try the entrepreneurial route and not quite sure what to do next or how to make it happen, or, they worked with a team before and now they're alone. So those kinds of things we work with, individuals. We also work with leadership teams. We're really a management consulting and a leadership development company. So we work with leadership teams in the larger companies as well. I would say we probably don't go over $50 million is probably the top end of the amount of revenue that we work with.
And I know from doing a little bit of research that you are incredibly involved in community, incredibly involved in giving back and supporting entrepreneurs that might be sort of a little bit before, as you said, you and your husband decades of experience in working with businesses, but businesses that are sort of at the startup phase. Talk us through a little bit of your community work and volunteerism, as well as the opportunities that you've had to present and mentor startup businesses.
Yeah, we really do love working with entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs. I am a volunteer mentor at Rev3, which is an incubator out in the western suburbs. So I go out there, I have office hours once a month where I'll meet with entrepreneurs, whether they're just starting out or they're actually renting space there at Rev3. We also, my husband is a mentor at 1871 in Chicago. So that's a volunteer situation where once a month he goes down there and he just helps and supports volunteers to help entrepreneurs. So they might have very basic questions or they have a lot of more complicated questions. And frankly, because we've been kind of through it all, we can really relate on many levels as to where the people are and how we can help them. So we do that. And my husband early on actually even started with high schoolers. He's also entrepreneur in residence at Future Founders, which really helps with high school and college-aged kids who want to be entrepreneurs, and they're not quite sure how to do that. So he started with them initially, and then we've given presentations to Future Founders and just to help the entrepreneurs kind of get started.
That's fantastic. Thank you for all that work in the community. And sticking to that theme, a lot of startups, they might be passionate and brilliant, actually, in certain areas of their business. Maybe they're an expert in finance. Maybe they're an expert in marketing. But we all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses. And I know that you and Tom are certainly dedicated to helping every entrepreneur figure out where their weakness is and how to overcome it. But let's talk about perhaps some weaknesses that you've identified. What lessons would you want to share with our listeners that you wish you knew when going into business that you've sort of learned the hard way, working through and growing your own ventures and helping others do the same?
Yeah, so I would say that when I had my event company and I ran that for 11 years, I was so toast after a while because I would work on the events during the week, and the events actually took place in the evenings and on the weekends, and I also did media campaigns around the country. So probably the biggest thing I learned was how not to be overwhelmed. Like literally, take a day off, at least one weekend day. Stop working after 8 to 10 hours. And that's so hard for an entrepreneur because they feel like there's always something they have to do or there's some other way, and especially startup. And, I appreciate that. Listen, you all have to work hard. You all have to work at what you believe in, but there's also the balance part of life. And I always tell people, you know what, you are not your business. You're not your business. I know it feels like it, but you are a separate person, and your business is a separate entity. And you need to look at it that way and how you can actually live your life. Many of our entrepreneurs have families already, and they need to balance that with, and we always say family comes first. Because after a while they grow up, I know mine are gone, and, those times are just so precious. And so that's one of the big things we find, is they're just overwhelmed and not quite sure how to make that timing work well.
Oh, fantastic. And thank you again for giving back to community. But let's talk about some specific examples of companies that you've worked with. I know you have some of those testimonials listed on your website, but talk us through perhaps an example of a business that you and Tom have been able to work with and help work through their challenges and are your success stories.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. Thank you. There's great success stories. We're working with one company called Fetch Find, which is an online education program for the pet industry. It's really to help entrepreneurs, help the pet industry become more knowledgeable and educated on working with the pets. And so if you own a pet store, for example, you could have your employees go through training. Very exciting things happening with them. They're getting funded now. They're really growing quite a bit. On the other side of the scale, I work with people, for example, a nurse out in New Jersey. And even though I'm in Chicago, of course, she wanted to write a book. and she just could not get it together to write a book. And so after 4 years, she was able to put together the book, and we did it within a year and a half.
Amazing. Well, we are just about out of time, and I want to make sure that our listeners can find those success stories and learn more about the fantastic work at Breakthrough Results, offered once again by Tom and Evie Carpel, which we're very appreciative for you joining us on the air tonight. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Well, two things. One, they could, of course, go on our website, which is www.break, through.us. They can also email me, and it's Evie, E-V-I-E, at break-through.us, because glad to give your listeners a 15-minute free consultation on the phone to talk about any part of their business that they would like to learn.
That's wonderful, Evie Carpel. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be sure to have you back on to provide more guidance, advice, and information. But speaking of guidance, advice, and information, we've got a lot more for you coming up after this quick break. So Chicago, don't touch that dial. You're listening to the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. You're listening to Get Down to Business. I'm your host, Shalom Klein, and I'll be right back in just a minute.